Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. I am back with my co-host, JC.
It's a pleasure to be back, Wendy Sellers, the HR lady. This is JC.
So I'm back from Paris.
How cool is that?
France.
That's so, I'm envious of you. Now, at the same time that you were over there, though, there was a lot going on in the world. I'm glad you made it back.
So that's kind of what I want to talk to our listeners about today is, I went on a vacation. We went to Paris and played tourist and happened to be in the middle of, national protests. Like I literally walked into the middle of a protest and I was like, whoopsie, Wendy, the HR lady needs to keep her mouth shut right now because we are not in America and I don't know what's about to happen. So I did manage to keep my mouth shut for that particular incident. Another one, maybe not so much. But
Oh, I know. It's too bad you didn't have a Sharpie. Just walk around like you were signing autographs and they were there for you. Play it off like you're a celebrity, Well,
what I wanted to kind of talk about today in our more casual conversation is just a little bit about the differences between the U.S. and other countries. Obviously, France will be one of them since that's where I just came back from. But there is so much difference between the U.S. and other countries with employment laws and culture. And, not all Americans have traveled into other countries. And so they may not even realize it. But it always makes me, remember when I'm in another country that, okay, the U.S. is in turmoil. So are other countries. Everybody is going through something somewhere. But I do wanted to talk about, customer service, specifically in France. 2 thumbs down. No
really?
Tips and rest. Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that in a minute. Tips, healthcare, retirement funds. What does the U.S. do better at? I'm going to say at this point, it's customer service. And that's probably all I can add to at this point.
Wow. And you have to wonder right away when you say that, how much are the people getting paid for the various things that they're doing? That does come up to the front of my mind.
That was the biggest concern of mine, or thing on, well, not so much a concern, but in the U.S. here, we're used to paying for tipping at restaurants, bars, things like that. You get good service, you tip. Even if you don't get good service, you still tip because these workers aren't even paid minimum wage, which in the United States is federally still only $7.25, something like that. Ridiculous. Well, I looked up with my new best friend, ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT to create me a chart of different countries and what their minimum wage and vacation was. And so I'd asked it to create United States, France, Japan, Canada, England. And it's a vast amount of differences in the minimum wage, but it's still really, really low. Like nobody could live off of $7 an hour, $10.25 or €10.25, $11 in Canada. Nobody can live off of this stuff. We're all doing it wrong.
I feel like I'm definitely in a foreign country. Like you said, across the U.S., employers covered by the FLSA but who are not subject to the Puerto Rico Minimum Wage Act must pay at least a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Now, that Puerto Rico Minimum Wage Act went into effect January 1st, 2022, increasing the island's minimum wage from $7.25 to $8.50. This is the reason why I say that I feel like I'm in a foreign country, Ms. Wendy Sellers, the HR lady, because in New York State, minimum wage right now is $15 an hour. You're hard-pressed to even find that. Most employers are paying approximately $18 to $18.25, and we currently have a push in New York State for $21 minimum wage per hour is what they're striving for. So I definitely feel like I'm in a foreign country compared to some of the other places in the U.S.
You're in one of the states that is, taking it seriously and not waiting for employers to say, okay, I guess we got to pay more. And I'm in a state that is not taking it seriously. There have been laws that are passed down in Florida, but if you're paying minimum wage, you have empty seats. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting, specifically in France, and I've known this for other countries as well, is that tipping is not the norm. And so I was like, all right, that's cool. That means you pay them more. Well, not necessarily the case, but they do pay them more. But tipping is not the norm. So here's the thing, JC. We go out, every day we went out to eat, and, we weren't staying at an Airbnb or anything. So we didn't have a kitchen. Go out to eat and you get your service. But what happens in the US? You go and you get your service, you sit down, a waiter or waitress, somebody comes over for your drink order, then they come back for your food order. Man, not in Paris anyways. I don't know about the rest of France. I haven't been there in a long time. I was only in Paris this time. They give you a menu and they don't come back for a very long time. And then when they come back, they expect you to order everything right then and there.
Oh, wow.
Your drink. If you want a water, you got to ask for the water, plus your drink, your food. And then, they would even prefer if you would order your dessert there too. So I'm thinking, okay, cool. This is a very busy town that we're in. They're going to get us out of here. That's why they want this all to go quick, quick, quick. Oh, no. You get your food and you may see the waiter in 45 minutes later.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh,
I was
like sitting
there going, oh my goodness, you could have just got me for 3 more drinks if you just came back. But I think they're kind of like, hey, we don't care. We're not getting tips from you. So then I'm thinking, all right, they're going to rush us out the door. Nope. You could sit there for 3 hours chatting on your, $26 meal, and they really don't care. It's expected. So I don't know. I don't know if I like it or not. I don't think I like it, but maybe it's something I could get accustomed to, where I can go to a coffee shop and, sit there for 4 hours and only have spent 12 euro. Like, what? This is weird. Very weird.
It's a big culture change. Almost a little more appreciation for that human aspect of things. While you were telling your story, Wendy, I was taking some of the dollar amounts and figures that we have in our handy-dandy chart that we have here today, and I was converting those over to U.S. dollars for the sake of our conversation. So as you stated, minimum wage in the United States is $7.25. And in France, that's $10.25 euros, $10.25 euros. I don't know how you say it. Converted to U.S. dollars, though, that's $11.23 an hour. Minimum wage in France. In Japan, that's 902 yen per hour is the minimum wage in U.S. dollars. In Japan, minimum wage is $6.85.
Oh.
Cost conversion for England, $8.91, 8.91 pounds sterling, converted to U.S. is $11.14 U.S. So while it's not $7, it's still definitely not 15 or 21 for that matter. And like you're saying, here we're in that culture where you're moving the tables. You want people in and out, or maybe the bill is going to be, a little bit higher if they just came back and took that drink order. It is an interesting culture dynamic. I wonder what goes into that. I wonder maybe it's an overtime type thing. The longer you stay, the longer they work. Could that be it? I don't know. Do they get overtime in France?
Yes. According to my new best friend, ChatGPT, there is overtime in France. And it starts at 35 hours. So once you work over 35 hours, you get, 36 to 43 hours, you get 1.25 times overtime. And then once you're at 44 hours, you get time and a half. So, it's definitely stagnated a little bit different than here. And, Canada has 1.5 for over 44 hours. Japan has 1.25 times overtime for over 40 hours. England doesn't have anything, but they have contracts. So it's a little bit different here. But then there's other things that are mandated by law in these other countries, such as minimum amount of vacation. So in France, 5 weeks, 5 weeks minimum is mandated by law. 5 weeks.
I think you get 5 weeks at most companies in the U.S. once you've been there 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And then even then, if you don't take it, they're like, we don't care. Work through it. We don't care. We're not going to cash you out. Some states do consider vacation as a compensation. But for the most part in the U.S., it's not considered compensation. It's just considered an extra benefit. And if you don't use it, that's your problem. So yeah, it was totally interesting.
The 5 weeks has to include holidays, though, right? Those got to be rolled up in there.
I don't think so.
They don't get paid holidays, do they?
I'm sure they do. They get, look at here. Our ChatGPT friend here says in France, Remember, United States, 0 holidays are paid unless you might be working for the government. In France, you get 5 weeks minimum vacation, paid vacation, plus 11 paid public holidays.
Okay. All right. Let's go one step further. I'm going to push
like 7 weeks.
I'm going to push you further. We're going to hit the gas here. So what if you're making the minimum wage, you got the 5 weeks, you've got these vacation holiday times, the whole nine, and now you've had a child. So here in the U.S., you're working the minimum wage job. You're going to have to get back to work. Or what's that?
Yeah.
You could be unpaid leave for, what's that, 8, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, right? 12 weeks unpaid in the U.S.?
Not with all companies, with companies that qualify for the Family Medical Leave Act, right? Which means you have to have 50 or more full-time employees on a regular basis. Well, guess what? Most companies don't have that.
Right.
So most companies in the United States, you're not even protected by the FMLA. Now, there are some states that you're protected by their own versions of paternity, maternity, FMLA, but generally speaking, as a federal law, majority of U.S. Workers are not protected. In France specifically, you get up to 16 weeks paid paternity leave and 11 to 25 days paid 16 weeks paid maternity leave, and then 11 to 25 days paternity leave.
Oh, wow.
And then the other countries have their own thing too. So
what about England? What about UK? Do we know?
England has, I want to say, 52 weeks a year.
What?
52 weeks of maternity leave,
wow.
And 39 of those weeks are paid. Now, I don't know, for the purpose of this conversation today, I don't know the in and outs of the laws of when you're qualified and things like that. But just looking at this on the peripheral, it's like, holy moly, United States, greatest country in the world. We need to do better. We need to be protecting our people. When I get clients or customers or just random people saying, oh, I can't find people to work or people are lazy, I just say, okay, show me your benefits. Talk to me about your compensation packages, because if you're not competitive and you're not going above and beyond U.S. law, I wouldn't want to work for you either.
Well, now, but here in the U.S., unions are so prevalent, right? I mean,
they're making a comeback, but there has been a huge decline in union memberships in the United States.
Good over in those other countries, it can't be unionized like here in the States, though.
They are. They 100% are. France has a very strong union presence. So do the other countries that we talked about, Japan, Canada, England, not as strong as France, but definitely much more stronger than the United States. But, unions are making a huge comeback. Unions. What are my feelings on unions? I'm kind of in the middle. I've always been in the past anti-union. And the more and more things stay the same, which is crappy. I'm say, hey, all the power to people that are forming unions. Just be careful. Folks that are listening, if you're considering forming a union, I know most of our listeners are HR folks, so they probably wouldn't be considered forming a union. But just be careful, because sometimes unions will just do it just to get the membership, but they're not actually changing a darn thing in your organization. So if you have the right union, then it could help your employees. If you have the wrong union, it's not going to do a darn thing, and your employees are just going to be more upset.
Coming to us from Euronews.com, according to the Interior Ministry, there were 740,000 protesters in Paris when Wendy Sellers was there. And there was also 27 arrests. It was caused by President Emmanuel Macron's insistence on changing pensions. The 10th day of action was called by unions, and thousands of French citizens marched. According to its website, strikers shut down the Eiffel Tower. The Louvre was closed due to a strike as well. France's interior minister dispatched 13,000 police officers, nearly half of whom were stationed in Paris, to prevent large protests from devolving into violence. He claimed that it was the first time. Macron used a special rule to pass reforms without a vote. Unions continue to hold large-scale protests until the government caves on the issue. A protester in central Paris stated, "We're completely exhausted. We simply want the government to listen and recognize our exhaustion." Over 1 million people went on strike and rallied across France, resulting in pitched battles in Paris. These were the bloodiest clashes between protesters and security forces while Wendy Sellers had dinner. Back to you.
So to be fair, Some of the things that you were talking about happened literally the day after we came home. So
really? Okay, good.
The first set of protests, which for our listeners, if you didn't know why, the president of France changed, not just the president alone, but they changed the retirement age from 62 to 64. And it didn't go the regular way that, it was basically overruled and shoved down everybody's throat and said, boom, this is the new law. You now have to work longer to get your retirement package from the government. Now, the retirement package in France is different than, the lack of retirement package in the United States, and it's all driven by the government. So it was a big deal. When I was there, the one thing that I did like is that the protests, everybody knew it was happening. Everybody knew that tomorrow, I believe it was on a Thursday, there's going to be protests. And so all the police knew about it. All the businesses knew about it. We knew about it. So we were able to change our plans. Well, I had to go back to a store that charged me too much money, and they weren't able to refund my credit card. And they're like, can you come back tomorrow and we'll just give you the cash? So I said, sure. So I'm like, I'm just going to walk there. I'm going to take some pictures. I'm going to walk there. And as I'm walking, literally half a block away, I'm walking right into a parade is what I was calling it, because it was a very, very calm and almost fun protest. But there was, one set of group people after another. I felt safe. I felt fine. But as soon as that sun went down, we got the heck out of Dodge and got out of that area, because that's when the crazies came out and they started flipping things over and start setting things on fire. But there's garbage everywhere. And then the day we come back is when now they shut down all the tourist attractions that I just went to. And so I feel for the people, because, if you're in your 50s and you're thinking, I only have a couple more years left to retirement, and then the government just told you, no, you've got 2 more years. That's a big slap in the face, a big bummer.
Surprise.
But at the same time, surprise. At the same time, it's kind of like a catch-22. Hey, we're running out of money. If you guys all want to retire, we're all going to have to work a little longer, because people are living longer, and we have more. France, just like the United States and every other country, has more people of retirement age than they do of every other age, because we're not reproducing enough babies to basically replace the baby boomers that are retiring all over the world. So the cool thing that I did learn is okay, we're all dealing with this all over. There's just different laws and different rules and different, obviously, government benefits, or in our case, mostly the lack of government benefits that we get depending on what country you're in.
The birth rate for the world in 2022 was 17.668 births per 1,000 people. That's a 1.15% decline from 2021. Back to you.
Don't go protesting by throwing things through somebody's window. Flipping over things in the street and lighting them on fire. I saw some of that and literally walked by some in the evening. We were walking very quickly to get to the metro, and I was just thinking, man, you just lit some dude's bike on fire. He's not the one you're protesting against.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just nonsense. That's where you give protest a bad name. Protest could be a good thing. Even, in your organization, when your people are saying, hey, I don't agree with that policy, or I don't agree with the new direction that we're taking. I don't know, maybe you've asked those people what their thoughts were before you've announced a new procedure or policy. And if you still can't come to terms, then make sure that you're at a minimum trying to give the people, your employees, something when you're making decisions that are going to upset everybody. But moral of me telling you all this is that the rest of the world is all dealing with their own stuff too, just like we are in the United States.
I've got a little something for you as we're talking about U.S. employment laws versus other countries. You might find this one interesting. Italy and China offer 2 hours of lunch break.
It's nice.
I just found that fascinating. I like food, and I think a 2 hour lunch would be really smooth,
When I was in Italy quite some time ago, I want to say it was 2006. I'm going to go with 2006-ish, something like that. We did experience those 2 hour lunch breaks quite a bit, and not in a good way as a passing through tourist, because I've been to Italy a few times, and the one time we were on a bus tour. And so whenever we stopped in a city, that was it. That was all the time you got in that city was those couple hours. Well, a few cities we stopped in during lunch break, and we couldn't get lunch because everything was closed. We couldn't shop and get like a t-shirt because everything was closed. So there were very few places that were open during those 2 hours as a tourist that I can go and say, hey, I got a trinket here. I got food for Christ's sake. So the 2 hour lunch break, while it was accustomed for that area, it definitely was not accustomed to me being a tourist when I had very limited time in that area. So I say, looking back, I blame that on our tour company because they should have known better and said, hey, let's be in this city at a different time and let's be on the road during the 2 hour lunch break so that we don't miss anything.
I've got one final thing for you and a closing question here from my side.
Sure.
It's been said before, there's the difference between those who live to work and those who work to live. And the person who lives to work tends to love their job so much they can't find a happy medium between their professional and personal life. And those who work to live focus more on their personal life rather than their work. Did you see a difference in that philosophy between what you know here in the U.S. and your time overseas? Living to work versus working to live.
I think it's a very individual question. I don't think I have enough information to answer that on behalf of an entire country. But I think just like us in the United States, we have both. We have people that are like, I'm just working 35, 40 hours. And when I clock out, I don't really care about this job. When I come back, I care. But other than that, I'm not going to really think about it. So I think many cultures, though, whether it be France or somewhere else, they make it okay for people to work just to pay bills. Like, hey, we want you to be a good employee, but you don't have to go above and beyond all the time. I don't think the United States is one of those countries that supports that. I think the United States, our like motto or our mindset here is you've got to be exhausted all the time. And if you're not exhausted, then you're not a good employee. And that's just not necessarily the case. And I want to thank millennials and Gen Z for saying, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. I know many of our baby boomer and Gen X people that are listening who are saying, oh, people don't want to work, they're lazy. I don't think that's the case. I think they just want to be passionate about something and they want to feel good about what they do and be paid a decent wage. If you're treating people good, they're going to naturally care. But if it's 5 o'clock and the day's over, they shouldn't have to care at 7 p.m. They shouldn't have to answer that text, that email, that phone call. You're invading their space now. And, I think we as a country in the United States, we need to think differently, like other countries do and say, hey, they're our employees. They're not, our indentured workers. They're just our employees. That's it. So that's my two thoughts on the differences between, the U.S. and other countries. Specifically, I just came back from France. I also wanted to thank France for letting me walk away with COVID as well. I don't know if I got it on the plane or in the country or whatever, but one last thing before we wrap up, JC, what I wanted to just share was I thought it was interesting getting back on the plane. I went from Paris to England and had a very long layover in England, in London to Tampa, Florida. And so I don't know where I picked up COVID, if it was in the airport, on the plane, or in the actual country of France itself. But I found it very interesting that when I was getting on the plane in France and then when I was getting on the plane in England, we had to answer COVID questions until they determined we were U.S. citizens. And they said, you don't need to answer those questions anymore. Oh. So it's like if you were from that country getting on the plane to the U.S., you had to be COVID free. But if you were from the U.S. going to the U.S., we didn't care. Just come back, even though you have COVID and you don't know because we're not asking you to test. And if I had it, I may have spread it to everybody, or I really don't think I had it. I think somebody spread it to me, but I thought that was super interesting that I'm glad I'm back in the States. I'm glad I got back to work and wasn't detained for like another week because I had COVID, but I just thought it was very interesting how other countries are handling COVID still and how we are handling it differently because as Americans, we have so many rights. And, God forbid those rights actually crush my rights and help another human being. A little bit of sarcasm there to end our show today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll chat with you soon.